There we go.
Do you want me to start talking?
So,
Yeah, just whatever
Graham,
you'd like,
yeah,
yeah.
so Graham,
What
you
you'd
had,
like.
yeah, you had mentioned something that you wanted to tell us before
Yes,
break.
yes, it's very, very important. These are things that are kind of the most important things in my whole, or some of the most important things in my life. So I wanted to make sure they got included.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of extraordinary. They're not any of the specific questions that you asked at all. First one, the first one is that is about my faith. You all know that I'm a person of very, 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 very deep faith. And when and how did that really get started, and how did it become that way? Well, I can answer that. Um, I was born into a regular family, my mother and my father, and I adored my father. I just absolutely adored him. He just hung the moon to me. And um, things didn't go well for whatever reason with my parents. And my father he was running around on my mother. It was not a good thing. But anyway, he decided he wanted to divorce her after just 7 years of marriage, and she was only 28 years old. And so anyway, he launched into that, and I was only 5 years old at the time. And so my mother and I, you already heard me say a while ago that when my father left us, that we moved to Houston and moved in with my mother's parents. And St. Mary's was the parish church that was within blocks of where Muddy and Granddaddy lived. And of course, every Catholic in those days, every Catholic church, parish church, had a grammar school, a parochial grammar school that went with it. And so I was enrolled at age 5, not 6 years old, just barely 5 years old, into the first grade, based on it was taught by Dominican nuns, and and the first grade teacher there at this particular time just happened to be a Dominican nun who had also been very, very close friends with my dad's only sister, Aunt Wheezy. And so, because of the knowing the nun, they agreed to let me start and be in her class. So I got to skip kindergarten, which,
Nice.
well, that would, but it turned out it was not really a good thing in my favor, because it had me so young. If I showed you all the picture of me from the first grade, I am the saddest looking little girl you've ever seen in your entire life. And it's because I was so tired I needed to be at home taking my afternoon nap instead of sitting there in that classroom. But anyway, I'm not kidding. I turned, I like when I graduated, for example, I had just turned 17 in February when graduation was in May. I was barely 17 years old. So all the way along in school, it really wasn't the class thing particular. When I got to be with teens or preteens, that's when it began being really, really hard, because your social life. My mother and my stepfather, they never wanted me to do the things that other kids in my class were doing, and it was reasonable because I was really too young. But on the other hand, it was horrible, and from somebody in my position, because I was not getting to do what the peers were doing. And that's a terrible time for that to be happening, more terrible than usual. But anyway, so I went to grade school all the way through the 7th grade at St. Mary's. And even though that my mother and I had it after, when I got to 3rd grade, we had moved out of Muddy and Granddaddy's house and into an apartment. And we lived in apartments for the next 7 years, just the two of us. And and all of that time, at first my father and my mother were not divorced. They were only separated, um, because my mother was still working toward being together. So the reason this is important is what difference it made to me. I was never told, even when my parents were divorced, until I was 11 years old. And the Divorce Act came about when I was 6. And I had been led to believe all that time, and I believed it, which is kind of one of the most amazing things that children today would never fall for that. But I was believing that what I had been told by my mother and my father, that that the reason we weren't back together was because my father was trying to find a place for us to live in New Orleans. When in fact that was not the real truth at all. And anyway, so now backtrack a minute to the how this related. At St. Mary's School, we had at the church we had daily mass every single day. There was mass and Holy Communion, and the other children in my class didn't do it, but every single one of those days I went to mass and communion every single day to pray for my family to get back together. Because I just knew that God would hear my prayers and He would answer them. And that was the first time that I learned the really hard lesson that God, it's not that He doesn't hear our prayers, but He doesn't always answer them the way we think that we would want Him to do it. Anyway, that was the beginning of my deep faith, is that I learned that you have to just trust God in many situations. That was just the first initial one, but it was huge in my whole lifetime. I cannot tell you how huge, because I consider the divorce of my parents to be the absolute worst thing that ever has happened in my whole life. And I've encountered a lot of different things, but nothing ever to compare to that. Anyway, I wanted you all to know and understand about that, because that really, you all have seen the kind of faith that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've been through a lot of things that are impossible as far as up to me or up to Granddad and I. But I never go there. I always put it in God's hands and just pray and have faith that God knows best, and whatever is God's will is going to happen in the end, and for me to be however I can to be accepting and contented with what is God's will. And He has carried me through a million things. The other most difficult thing that I've ever dealt with, of course, was the loss of Uncle Andy, my firstborn son. Um, anyway, I wanted you all to know these things because I believe it's so important for every one of us to know in life, is that we need to always put God first and our faith and trust in God, and second, family. And that's exactly what I do. The family is just everything to me, just absolutely everything. And I mean that with all my heart, and I demonstrate it no matter what, whether I have Parkinson's or anything else. That never interferes with this particular issue. The family is just always, and always has been, and always will be, the single most important thing to me. And that, if nothing else goes in there, I want that to be in there.
Absolutely. And I can tell you confidently, and I'm speaking for us, and I'm speaking for my parents, and Tyler and the cousins, and yeah. I can tell you confidently that we all love you too, and we know that we are a priority for you. And we've been able to tell that our entire lives. And I tell you what,
Yes.
It's gonna be the best part of this video.
Well, I'm not trying to be best or anything like that.
No, of course.
I was just thinking about it last night, and like I was telling Jake earlier, was that when I looked at it at first, the old basic characteristic, Catholic characteristic there is, oh my gosh, it says I should do this and this and this and this, and asks for that specifically, and so I've got to do just exactly that.
No.
And then I thought, no, I really don't have, no, I have freedom to do some things that according to what I really believe how things are in importance. And so that's what I was wanting to do. I feel like the things like my education and all those other kinds of things, yes, they're of significance in each and every person's, but those are not those are not really the things that form the important stuff in my life.
Absolutely. And actually, funny enough, Jake actually added, I don't know if you saw it, I think it was like the second to last question. It was, how has your faith evolved over your life? And you answered exactly that.
You know, I wanted to ask as well, a little bit about, you know, well, never mind.
No, well,
I guess I just wanted to.
Don't hesitate, Jake, because
No, like,
I've opened my heart and soul to you all, so I'm here to answer anything you want to know.
Mm-hmm.
May I
Jake, were you gonna-
put in a footnote about Graham's faith?
Mhm.
She has a grandson
You're right.
who said that she had a red phone to upstairs, and now all of our friends know about that. We will be talking to a friend, and we'll find out that they have some sort of a crisis going on, and we tell them we'll put Graham on the red phone.
Yeah.
That's that straight line. Yeah, her faith is obvious to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's been obvious
And
our
I
whole
guess
life.
another aspect of it that was important to me to make mention of for the future of you all and all the rest of the kids and grandkids is that we never know as life goes by. From the beginning, we cannot know what's really ahead of us. It's just, life is just full of surprises, and some of the surprises are good and some of them are just awful. You just never know. But one of the things that I believe firmly from living to be 80 years old now is that when you have real, true, genuine, deep faith in God, you don't worry about that when these seemingly impossible things arise. You just call on God, and He's always there. Nothing else is. He's always there, and He will help us. He will help us through whatever it is. No matter how impossible it might seem, He will help us through. And I want all of you, every single last one. We've got a whole lot of variance right now throughout our family. Some people that I don't think even believe in God, and all sorts of variations. But again, that's in God's hands. Only God knows those things, and really knows, according to God Himself, what He believes is right or not right from one person to another, if there is something right or something not. And so I just that what I personally recommend to each and every one of you, including the ones that have different ideas and stuff, is just stick with whatever you truly believe is right, no matter what it is, whether it's politics or something else. And don't worry about anything else, because I believe that, for one thing, when any of us are young, we have certain ideas, and also with the passing of time, sometimes a short time, sometimes years and years and years later, sometimes we see things differently, in all kinds of different situations. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my goodness, where did this come from? This is different. But that just happens, and if you have to, I think we have to have some kind of confidence in ourselves and our ability to discern things. Not just good from bad, right from wrong, but kind of as we go along, what might be something better for me now, or worse for me now. And I mean, you all might think I'm being goofy, but I'm really serious, because I believe this is really how life works, and I've seen it, and I saw Uncle Andy, I saw your dad, I saw Aunt Annette. I've seen all of them, and plus a lot of you grandchildren now struggling with certain issues and stuff, and people believing absolutely that this is right, and some of us think, no, it's absolutely not right. But anyway, that's what I say about it. Just follow whatever you believe is truly, truly, truly the right thing to do, and have faith in God. And I believe none of you can go wrong. in the end, it's gonna all be how it's supposed to be.
Couldn't have put it better. Couldn't have put it better. Granddad, do you have any thoughts about anything that she said? I know she said a lot. It's kind of hard to put better than that, but
Yeah, until I met Dianne, I was what they call unchurched. I don't know quite why. It was not much of a thing in the family that I grew up in. I have I have a joke that I frequently tell that fits in with some of this. When I got out of school, I wound up working in out in the field in Del Rio, and seldom saw anybody during the course of my work day that was here legally. And then I wound up spending 6 months on the south flank of the Alaskan Range up in Alaska, and I lived down in a company camp in South Texas. And I finally got transferred to Corpus Christi, and the time had finally arrived in my life where I could begin my search for a spouse. And so I was supposed to be looking for oil, but I was really looking for a wife. And I did the only things I knew how to do. I went to most of the churches and all of the bars. And it turns out that I found Dianne at the office where I worked. And that's a story worth telling. I had gone off, before I met Dianne, I would take 2 weeks vacation, 2-week leave of absence. I'd be gone for a month. I had a little Volkswagen Carmen Ghia that didn't burn any gas, and you could even sleep in the back of it the way it folded down. And so I went out to see the country. I'd been gone a month, came back to work. I'd been back maybe a week, and I needed to make a copy of a map. So I went down to the copy room, and there were 2 guys that worked down there, but there was someone new. There was this girl in a red dress. I mentioned a while ago about how I had this intense recollection of the disappointment at that girl's dorm when I didn't know what was going to happen. I remember that moment. I remember that red dress, and I remember that girl. And so you would wait your turn, and you would give your map to these guys to go make a copy of it, one of the several machines that they had. And so the girl in the red dress went and waited on somebody else, and one of the guys came up to me, "Can I help you?" "Yeah, I need to get a copy of this." So I went back to my office, and I remember that pretty well. I sat there and I thought about that a good while, and I grabbed that same map, went back to the copy room, and I pretended to be studying that map, but my eyes were looking over the top of it, and I was watching people. I timed it so that she was going to have to wait on me. So she steps up to the counter, and I step up there, and I say, "Hi," and she said, "Can I help you?" And just wouldn't give me the time of day. "Yeah, I need a copy of this map." So she went and made a copy, handed it to me, and went on about her business. So I went back and thought about that some more. Back to the copy room. So I'm going to try this again. So anyway, same result. I tried to make some conversation, but she was busy. There was a girl that I knew, and I knew she was kind of busybody, and sort of a busybody who knew everybody there. So I went to her office and sat down and said, "Say, I want to ask you a question. I was down in the copy room, and there's a new girl down there. Do you happen to know her?" "Yeah, her name's Dianne. Do you know if she maybe does she have a boyfriend?" She said, "I don't think so." And I said, "Well, what's the possibility then of introducing us?" And she said, "Nothing to it." Well, before an hour was up, I was standing there waiting for the elevator, and the doors open. That girl's name was Molly. The doors open, and there's Molly, and there's Dianne stepping out. And Molly does the introduction. So now we are formally introduced. So it's back to the copyright. I wound up with my office just full of copies.
And that,
All of which were thrown away.
and that was
Right.
and that was the beginning of 995 cups of coffee.
I asked her if she'd like to go get a cup of coffee, and she would. And I pretty well knew from the very beginning that she was the one. And if you ask me, how did you know that? What did you know? Well, there were things that I knew. There were things that I saw. There were behaviors that I saw. So I thought that she was the one, and here 60 years later, turns out she was.
Gotta trust that intuition.
But yeah, that's that was an entertaining chapter. We went back a few years ago to Corpus Christi. Molly was having some kind of an event.
It was her 70th birthday.
What?
It was her 70th birthday.
70th birthday. We went back and saw Molly again, and I'll be forever indebted to Molly.
Mm-hmm. So the next thing, number one,
Well, I wanted to ask what I was hesitant to ask was I wanted to ask if your mom ever remarried.
Oh yes. Granddaddy McCullough. Do you remember Granddaddy McCullough?
Mm-hmm. The reason why I was
Yes, she actually though, that's an interesting thing in itself. My mother was just such an amazing person, and it's so unfortunate because in her lifetime there were people that believed that my mother wasn't very smart, that she wasn't very intelligent, that she didn't do very much of anything, and I never really reflected on that particularly until in the last few years. And what I realized was my mother was, it's never been more wrong. My mother was a very, very, very intelligent person. She had been so devastated by what my father did, and when he did it, she was such a young person and everything. It's a miracle that she survived that in the first place. And then she was so serious about what was right and what was wrong, and she had never done anything. She was not guilty of anything at all. At one point, there were even, my father was even trying to pin on her that she had done something wrong, something morally wrong. But no, my mother never did that. She was the most serious person, and she was a devout Catholic person, and she was till the day that she died. As a matter of fact, I'm a Catholic all my life, but there are a few things that I don't agree with. I'm not going to go into what they are, but there are a few things that are just, and one of the things though is about annulment. That to me, the Catholic Church says no, but to me, annulment is nothing but a Catholic divorce. And the reason I'm very, very against annulment is because I have been the product of something like that at one point at a time in my life, and my mother, I've mostly more than what the effect on me, but according to what they say is that if you have a marriage annulled, then that means the first marriage was not legitimate, and so therefore I say that makes children like me be illegitimate children, and that was not the case. My mother and father were married in a Catholic church. They did everything that they were supposed to do. I'm not an illegitimate child anyway, so I have a real issue about that. But more importantly than that is that the idea that if you all may not know this yourself, but I'm going to clarify it, that in the Catholic Church, they don't believe that it's not okay to get a divorce. That's just fine, just so long as the person, if either the person's spouse has to be deceased, or if their spouse is alive, then it has been considered something to be excommunicated from the church if the person got a divorce and remarried while you still had your original spouse was living. Well, of course, my father was still living. He was still living until 1992. And so when my mother was not, she didn't even date anybody for 7 years. And when she did start to have a date, it was because family members, and I mean, this is even my grandmother's, all Catholic people saying to her, Dottie, you need to go out again. You're too young. You need to be able to have a normal life. And she would have forfeited it forever if she had really just been pushed. And anyway, and my stepfather, actually, they were not blood related, but they have same aunts and uncles, but on the opposite side. Usually when people hear that, it blows them away because they don't understand. But that's the deal. And so my grandmother Muddy's older sister, the same one that was a grandmother of my cousin, Lynn Friedman, she was the one who introduced my mother and my stepfather to one another, and they ended up determining my stepfather fell in love with my mother, and he proposed to her within not very many months, and I think he knew that her answer was going to be yes, because he had gone to Corpus Christi and he had purchased a brand new house, newly built house in a new subdivision. He didn't have a high paying, he worked for Humble Oil, but he didn't have a high paying job. He was a gas measurement supervisor. And that was a good job. It was a very good job, but he wasn't an engineer or a geologist or anything like that. So it didn't have that kind of pay or anything that went with it. But anyway, he asked my mother to marry him, and she accepted. And so we moved then to Corpus Christi, which was a really big deal in my life because I was 12 and a half years old. I had not had any father in the house with me of any man at all for the last 7 years completely, and now and my mother was there. Just she was always wanted me with her all the time, everywhere, and so now all of a sudden my mother was with my stepfather all of the time, and it had all sorts of impacts.
New dynamic.
Yes, yeah, completely, and my stepfather had this new house in this new subdivision. There was also a brand new school. They used to call them junior high schools back then, and so Hamlin Junior High School was 4 blocks away from the new house that we moved to. So my stepfather said that was in walking distance. So why should he pay the price for me to go to a Catholic school? So therefore, I was taken out of the kind of school, the only school I'd ever known for the first 7 years of school life, and put in this public school, which was like going to a foreign country. It was so different. And I stayed there for a year and a half, and finally I was so miserable at the second half of 9th grade that I begged my mother to please let me go to Incarnate Word Academy, to go back to Catholic school like I was accustomed to. And as soon as I went there, I was so happy, and my grades improved and everything. It was just, but I didn't realize it until just the last few years that I think that I was going through a tremendous lot of transitions, and I didn't even ever realize it all these years. And they had some very negative impacts on me. And one of the other things I learned is when you move into a situation like that, my stepfather was a wonderful man, and he loved me very much, and I loved him too. But it was not my father, and that old expression, "blood is thicker than water," is really true. Even though I know and I knew that my father had done something very wrong, he was wrong about it. He should never have done it. Also, he was always my father, and I still loved him. You have to separate things like that. It does not mean the whole person is not a good person or is an evil person. sometimes people just make huge mistakes. And that's again where you have to all the time be considering that every one of us is a human being, and God made all of us, and we're all imperfect. There's none of us who are perfect. Um, and so when we start living life and having to think about other people and passing judgment and stuff, it's always crucially important to think about that. That these are whoever it is, no matter how close they are related to you or anything, that they're not going to be perfect, no matter how wonderful you think they are. Um, anyway, I feel like I'm really just ranting to you, but
Oh no.
I just feel like this is really, really, really important stuff. And if I died in the next 5 minutes, I would be happy that I left you all with this knowledge, because I think it stands to somewhere down the line, maybe multiple times in the rest of your lives, to impact you. And I believe that you all will remember if a time comes and all of a sudden there's something that clicks in, you're going to remember. Graham told us that. Graham told us that. And I'm not sitting here with, instead I'm sitting here with a great big heart, just full of love for you all, and just wanting you all to be able to be the happiest people you possibly can be for your entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, you have so much wisdom. We appreciate that, and I agree. The reason why I asked that question was because something you said was profound about you prayed to God every day to bring your family back together, and you said that God doesn't always answer it the way that you wanted, and so that's why I asked that question, and then it was impactful to me. So yeah, but that was beautiful. I'm glad you included that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it time to ask the?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. So the next thing that we had. Oh, sorry, Granddad.
Well, a while ago I was asked about my thoughts about Dianne's faith, and I wandered off the trail. I'll say this: from the first day we were married, I went to mass with her, and I've been doing that for 60 years. I can kind of tell when I go to mass that I'm a little bit different than the rest of the Catholics in there. It's really good to get your faith developed when you're very, very young, I think, and that just didn't happen to me that way. But that said, I have pretty much found a home there at the church that we go to now. There are 3 priests. One is from India, and I just can't understand a word he says. Partly his fault and partly my fault. And then the other one was a priest on a campus, and he's very theological. Then there's a third priest, an Irishman, and by the way, if we get around to that, the Whites came here from Ireland, so maybe I have some special connection there. But I go out of my way to time it to try to hear his homilies, because the man has lived a life with his eyes wide open. He knows what life is like down here on the streets, and he tells you how to deal with it. I'll give you one example, and not to be morbid, but once you get to be 88, you're a little surprised sometimes when you wake up in the morning and you're still there. So, and he talked once at some length about funerals that he had conducted, and went on and on and on. And what the man wound up saying at the end was that death is normal. There's nothing abnormal. There's nothing odd. There's nothing unusual. There's nothing surprising. It's normal. And for myself, that sort of settles it for me. It's normal. It's going to happen someday. It's a normal thing. And people will do the normal things when it happens, and they'll survive. So I've to a significant degree, I found a home there.
The other thing I'd like to interject too is that Granddad, he's exactly right. I remember when we were just first married that he told me he wanted to go to church with me. And I thought that was very nice. But one of the things that I made very clear from the beginning is that I was not trying to persuade him to believe what I believe or to do anything whatsoever, that he was free as a bird to do whatever he wanted to do. And he said he really, really wanted to come to church with me because he believed that it was a good thing for families for husband and wife to be at the same place. And I agreed with him then, and I still do. And as a matter of fact, when your daddy decided to go to the Methodist church with your mother, that was what he told me too. And I still, yes, I see and understand that. I think that's really right. That whatever a husband and wife, I mean, it's not always that way. There are husbands and wives that one goes to this church and the other one goes to that church. But I think if for unity, I think the more unity you can have within a family, within a couple and their children and stuff, I think that's a real positive contributing factor to a healthy and successful, lasting marriage.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I think about
Absolutely.
it. The more that you have with people on the same page, rather than something that can at any point could turn divisive.
Mm-hmm.
So, are y'all ready to move on to? This is a topic that we have been itching to ask you guys about, and both of y'all will be able to speak on, even though you probably don't have direct memory of this time.
Okay.
Y'all are both of your inputs is going to be really important. We want to talk about historical events, and Granddad, you're one of the only people left that we know that lived through World War II.
Yeah, I wanted to ask specifically what your reaction was to Pearl Harbor.
Oh yeah, that and yeah. After you get talk about Pearl Harbor, we just wanted to talk. I also wanted to ask about just the general aura around the whole thing, how people acted, what the attitude was, how people felt about Adolf Hitler. I just very very general questions, but yeah, there's a lot we wanted to ask about related to that question.
I think nearly everybody alive at the time remembers what they were doing when they heard about Pearl Harbor. I remember exactly what I was doing. It had a kind of long, narrow backyard, and there was a concrete ping pong table back there, but it was broken, so you couldn't play ping pong on it because the ball would bounce crazy. And I was back there playing with a little toy car. I was 9 years old. And my brother came out of the house and said, the Japs, that's what we called them back then. Political correctness hadn't yet been invented. The Japs had bombed Pearl Harbor and we're at war. And
hey, Granddad, just 1 second. Jake, have you?
Yeah, I'm checking on it. I can restart just because we're
just
pausing.
just
but I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm just letting